and welcome to my very first YouTube tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how I crocheted this sweater. It's worked from the top down, so you start at the collar, you make increases, and then you add the sleeves. And I just really like this way of making sweaters because then you don't have to sew things together. And I'm also going to show you how I kind of make this scrappy look where I bring in lots of different colors and add striping and things like that. I do want to say that there are a lot of other creators that have made sweaters that are kind of a similar shape to this one, so I just wanted to shout them out really quick. I'm going to put some screenshots of their Instagram, specifically the sweaters that kind of inspired my design, and their handles, so go check them out, go follow them, buy their patterns, support them. They're all wonderful creators. If you follow me on Instagram or TikTok, you may have seen this sweater that I made with all thrifted yarn. And then this sweater, which is also made with mostly thrifted yarn, and the rest of it is kind of left over from other projects. I highly recommend using yarn that you already have for this project. I sort of talk about how you pick the colors once I get into more of the tutorial part of the video. This is a great scrap project. This is a great project if you thrift sort of some random yarn somewhere, if you get it on eBay or Facebook Marketplace. That's where I like to get my stuff. But yeah, just try and use stuff that's already out there in the world. If you like this video and want to support my crochet work, you can follow me on Instagram. I also have patterns for sale on my Etsy and Ribbler, and I have a free written pattern on my Ko-fi account. All of this stuff will be linked below in the description. If you have any questions about any part of the video, then you can leave them in the comments and I'll answer them, or you can send me a DM on Instagram and I will get back to you as soon as I can. With that being said, this is kind of a vague pattern at points. I don't give you a lot of exact numbers. So if you're a really beginner crocheter, you may need to ask for help, and don't feel bad about that. I'm always happy to answer any questions that come up. So without further ado, let's get into the video. I've chosen my color palette. This is, as you can see, mostly blues. This is kind of green. It looks a little blue in the camera, but I'm basically just going to mix and match these all around. Most of these are yarn scraps. Some of them are thrifted. Some of them are from Facebook Marketplace. So this is the perfect project for when you have a lot of kind of scraps built up. So depending on the thickness of the yarn that you choose for your project, you may want to double up strands. So you'll hold 2 strands of the same yarn. You may want to triple up strands, or you may want to just do 1 by itself. So like this one, it's a thicker, like a bulky yarn. So most of this is just 1 strand, and then a few parts of it have 3 strands together. And then this one is the neckline, has 2 strands held together, and then the rest of it has 3. So it's really just up to you based on like what you want it to look like. This one, the yarn is much thinner, so even with 2 or 3 strands held together, it's still pretty flexible and pretty see-through. And then this one is a bit less so. And then when you're choosing your hook, this also is just based on preference. Obviously, if you choose a larger hook, this is a 10mm hook, then your project is going to be much looser and kind of have more like the appearance of holes in it. And then if you choose a smaller hook, this is a 6.5mm hook, then the fabric is just going to be much denser. So depending on how many strands of yarn you use and what size hook, that will totally change the look of the project. And if you're not really sure what look you want to go for, then you can just try out some things. That's what I've done. For both of the sweaters that I just showed you, I actually used an 8mm hook, but for this, I think I'm going to use a 7mm hook. So when you're choosing kind of how to organize your colors, the colors that you have the most of, I recommend having them kind of run throughout the project. So for example, I have a lot of this blue yarn, so I think that I will have this running along with another color for most of the time. I just find that it unifies the whole piece a little bit, but again, that's totally up to your preference and depending on sort of what combination of colors that you have. And if you're a planner, you can plan things out in detail. You know, oh, I'm going to start with this and then add in this and then add in this and then go back to this color. Or what I like to do is just kind of pick stuff up whenever I feel like it. Whenever I feel like there needs to be another color, then I'll just add one in and drop another one, and I'll show you that process throughout. So I'm actually going to start with the 6mm hook for the collar and then switch to the 7mm hook once I get to the body. So the first thing you're going to do is make a slip knot. I do this by wrapping around my fingers with kind of an X like this, and then pulling the yarn through like this. So I'm going to start off by chaining the amount that I want my neckline to be. So I ended up chaining 62, and again, this will vary a lot based on what yarn you're using, what size hook you're using, and how wide you want your neckline to be. So just sort of try it on your body. That's kind of going to be my advice for most of this, is figure out what you like and what fits well on your body by just trying it on a lot. Because this is worked from the top down, once you start to work into it, you just slip it over your head and it will fit on you like a little collar, and you can really start to see how it's going to fit. So the next thing that you need to do is decide what you want your collar to look like. For this one, I just started double crocheting immediately into the chain, which is going to give you kind of a flat look, and the neckline will just blend in with the rest of the body. If you want a little bit more of a defined kind of ribbing look, like is here, you can do front post and back post double crochets. And I think I'm going to do that for this project, so I'll show you how to do that. But if you don't want to do that, you can just skip ahead and go straight to making double crochets into the chains. So we're going to join our chain. You're going to insert your hook into the first stitch of your chain. Make sure that it is not twisted, because if it's twisted, you'll really be able to see it. So spend some time making sure it's not twisted. Insert your hook, and then take your working yarn, yarn over, pull through your first chain, and then pull through the loop on your hook. And you're going to chain 2 and turn your work. Now you're just going to put 1 double crochet into every chain space, and then I'll show you the front post and back post double crochet ribbing once I've finished that. So to double crochet, yarn over, insert your hook into the chain, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And you're going to do this all the way around until you get back to right where you started over here. I made it all the way around. I just have 1 more stitch left, so I'm going to make 1 more double crochet and then slip stitch into the top of this double crochet here, making sure again that this is not twisting. So pull through and then pull all the way through again. So at this point you can either do front post, back post, double crochets, or you can just start making your double crochets, in which case you can skip ahead a little bit, but I'm going to show you how to do the front post double crochets. So you're going to chain 2, and then to make a front post double crochet, the stitch, kind of the body of the stitch is the post. So you're going to yarn over and insert your hook, not into the stitch right here where you normally would, but sort of into this space right here. And then you're going to loop it around and have it come out the other side. Yarn over and pull through, and you should be wrapped around this stitch right here. And then you're just going to make a double crochet as normal. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. And then for a back post double crochet, you're going to yarn over and insert your hook not through the front like this, but through the back. So from the back to the front. And then go across the post, across the stitch, and then grab your yarn, pull through to the front, and then pull through all the way to the back. This one's a little bit trickier. And then double crochet as normal. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So I'll show you both of those again. Front post, yarn over, insert from the front to the back, around, grab the yarn. So you have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and then a back post, yarn over, insert your hook from the back to the front, across, grab your yarn, pull it all the way to the back, then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So you'll already see this texture emerging. I just think it looks really nice as ribbing. So you are going to do that all the way around, and then I will show you what to do next. I have made it to the end of my collar, and I like the width of the ribbing, so I'm going to start working on the body now. If you are using a thinner yarn, you may want to do more rows of this ribbing effect, or 2 might be enough. If you were going to go on, you would slip stitch into this stitch, chain 2, and then repeat the same thing all the way around, making your front post double crochets on the kind of raised front post and your back post double crochets on the back part. But I'm going to move on for now. So I'm going to slip stitch, and then I'm actually going to switch to my other hook, which you don't have to do this. I just kind of like the look of a tighter collar. So now I'm using the 7mm hook. I'm actually going to add another strand of yarn at this point, just for fun. So the way I do that is I make a slip knot, and then I just slide it onto my hook. So now instead of 2 loops on the hook, I have 3. And once you start to add in new yarn, you're going to kind of choose which side is the wrong side and let the tail hang out on that side. So I'm going to continue with all 3 of these colors. I'm going to chain 2 and then make double crochets all the way around for this round until I get back to this stitch over here. Okay, so this next part is going to use a little bit of math, and I will actually link the video that I watched to kind of break down more specifically where these numbers are coming from. But basically the way that this design works is we're starting from the collar, And then these lines right here are where we're going to increase along the body so that the collar is wide enough to fit the chest area. So to do this, we have to mark the places that we are going to be increasing. So there's 4 markers on the collar that we're going to put, and the front sections are going to be 40% of the stitches, and then the side sections that will go kind of over the shoulder from the front to the back will be 10% of the stitches. So my collar has 61 stitches, and 10% of 61 is 6.1 stitches. We'll round that down to 6. And then 40% of 61 is 24.4, and I'll round that down to 24. So what that means basically is in between the 2 stitch markers will be 24 stitches here and 6 stitches here. So I've marked a stitch. This will be one of my stitch markers. I like to put it a couple stitches away from where the start of the row is. And then I counted across 24, and on the 24th stitch, I'm going to put another stitch marker in. And then from this stitch marker, I'm going to count 6. So this is my 6th stitch, and I'm going to put another stitch marker in here. And then I can either count 24 across the back or count 6 around this way, and I'm going to count 6 around this way. And then mark this stitch right here. Okay, I have all of my stitch markers in. I couldn't find a 4th one, so I just tied a little piece of yarn around the stitch, which is totally fine. And I'm actually going to drop one of these 3 colors. So I have my stitch like this with all 3. And for my slip stitch to join the row, I'm just going to literally drop this one over here and make my slip stitch with only these 2 colors. And once you've dropped a color, you can cut it, and then I like to just tie it off right here before I forget. So tie it off with your working yarn, and that will keep it nice and secure, and then it won't unravel. Okay, so you're going to chain 2 and make double crochets until you get to your first stitch marker. So for me that's 2. And then in the stitch with my stitch marker, I'm going to make 1 double crochet, chain 1, and then make 1 more double crochet. So this is how we're going to increase every round. If you want it to increase more quickly, you can chain 2, and then you will just keep going with double crochets until you get to your next stitch marker. And once you get to your next stitch marker, you are just going to do the same exact increase as you did on the last one. So double crochet, chain 1, and then another double crochet. So continue going, making an increase in each one of your stitch markers, and then join your round with a slip stitch at the end. I've reached the end of the row, so I'm going to slip stitch, chain 2, and then just continue in the same way for this next row as well. Before we put our increases into the stitch where the stitch marker was, and now we're going to put them into the chain 1 space that we made. As you can see in this stitch, there's the double crochet, chain 1, and another double crochet. So this time you're going to place a double crochet into this chain 1 that kind of creates a hole. You're going to chain 1, and then you're going to put another double crochet into that chain 1 space and continue on. At this point you can take your stitch markers out. I'm just leaving them in so it's a little bit easier to see where I'm increasing, but you can take them out once you finish this first row. I've reached the end of my row and I'm going to add in a new color and drop one of these, which you do not have to do at this point, but I'm just showing you how to do it so that you can add that in whenever you want to do that. So you're going to do the same thing as before, where you make a slip knot and slip it onto your hook, and then complete the slip stitch as you would. So insert and grab just the 2 colors that you want to continue with. So I'm leaving this color behind. In my next row, I'm going to cut it and then tie it off with the working yarn. And then chain 2 and carry on as I was before. You're basically going to continue just like this with double crochets, making increases into each of the chain 1 spaces until your work reaches the kind of beginning of your armpit. I'll insert a clip of what that looks like on my body and kind of how far down that goes, but that will be different for everyone. And then once you get to that point, you're going to start making the sleeves. So I'm going to get my work to that length and then I'll show you what to do next. So once you're at the correct length, you're gonna have this sort of cape looking thing. And as you saw in the clips that I inserted, it comes down to kind of just below your armpit, where your armpit starts. So the beginning and end of my rows have been on sort of this shorter part, which is the sleeve part. This is where my shoulder will go. So I'm actually going to cut my yarn and reattach it. Pull through and we'll weave this in later. I'm going to reattach my yarn just a few stitches before one of these chain 1 increase spaces. I'm going to do 4 stitches before, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Get my slip knot. Pull it through here. And then I'm going to chain 2 and make 2 double crochets in the next 2 stitches. So 1, 2. And now I'm actually going to connect the kind of underarm part. So what you're going to want to do is find this chain 1 increase space on the other side. So you're going to connect those kind of like this. And see, I have 1 double crochet between my hook and this little chain 1 space. So on the other side, I'm going to be going into this hook. And you probably will need to chain a few to connect them. So I'm going to chain 4 and then insert my hook into this stitch right here and make a slip stitch. Then I'm going to chain 2, turn my work over to this side, and then continue on making double crochets until I am 1 stitch away from my chain 1 space on this side. So I've made it all the way across. I just have 2 stitches left before I get to my increase. So I'm going to make 1 more double crochet and then chain 4. The number you chain might be different depending on how much space you need under your arm, but make sure you chain the same amount on both sides. And then I will find the increase space on this side and then count 1 stitch out and make a slip stitch, connecting the chain from one side to the other. So we're making this armhole right here. Chain 2, turn, and then you will make double crochets all the way across this side, just like you did before, until you get to where you started your row, right over here. Once you get to the end of the row again, you're just going to make a slip stitch, just like you have been doing, and I'm actually going to change colors again. So make my slip knot, pull it through both, and then tie the tail with these 2. I'm going to continue on with just this gray-blue color. So chain 2 and double crochet all the way around. When you get to the chains, you will just put 1 double crochet into each chain. So I'm coming up on the other sleeve with the chains, and I just wanted to show you again kind of what you do. I ended up going back and adding another little thread of this blue yarn to the gray. I think it looks really nice. That's kind of the fun part about this, is you can experiment with something, and if you don't like the way it looks, you can just go back and add in another color or take away a color or just try something else out. So as we come up on the chains, again on this side, you'll just do the same exact thing that you did on the first side. It's making double crochets and however many chains you have should be the number of double crochets that you put in. So I have 4 chains, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then this part might be a little bit tricky, but you're just going to put a double crochet in this space, which is kind of the slip stitch space, but I think it helps because you want this to increase slightly. And then it sort of leaves this hole. You just put a double crochet right in there. And from then on, it's pretty clear where you're going to be putting the stitches, just in the normal place. I'm about to finish this first row that's working into the chain. At this point, you may want to increase a little bit around the chest if you think that you need it. I have a pretty small chest, so I'm not going to make any more increases, but if you were to increase, I would suggest making 2 double crochets in a couple places in the armpit, and this will just kind of make the sweater flare out a bit. Basically, from this point, you will just keep going until it is the length that you want it to be. And you can either add a little ribbing at the bottom, kind of like we did at the top, or you can just leave it without the ribbing. It's totally up to you. Once I have the length of mine finished, then I'll show you what to do for the sleeves. So I moved to a slightly different location just so you can see the whole sweater a little bit better. But I finished the body. I'm having mine kind of just stay pretty cropped. And I finished one sleeve. So to get started on your sleeve, you're going to attach the yarn in the armpit area with a slip knot. So make yourself a slip knot and put your hook through. So you're going to bring it through and then chain 2. And then you're just going to continue working the round around the sleeve in double crochets. I like to crochet over this little tail here, so that's just one less end to weave in at the end of your project. And at these sections where there's not really a stitch to go into, you're kind of going into a double crochet from earlier, just put your hook in sort of wherever it can fit. And then as you go around, you'll just be placing 1 double crochet into each of these stitches right here. And once you get to the end of the row, you will just slip stitch, chain 2, and continue on in double crochets. So if we take a look at the construction and the shape of the sleeve that I've already done, all of the rows from here, which is the same as the first row that I just showed you on this side, all the way until here, I placed a stitch marker so it's easier to see. These are all just double crochets in the round, just with changing colors, changing weights of yarn, with no increases, no decreases or anything. And then when I get to here, I start increasing. So for me, that was 13 rows, and this part sort of hits, you know, a little bit lower than mid forearm. The last 7 rows are increases. So just continue on in the round, changing colors as you want to or as you don't, until you get to about just a little bit further than mid forearm. Another decision that you will make at this point is whether you want your sleeves to have symmetrical sort of color stripings or if you want them to be different. For my other 2 sweaters, the sleeves are just kind of different and random. I will insert some clips of that. And for this one, I think I'm going to do symmetrical colors. So as you can see, my first 2 rows are this darker blue and this sort of teal color. And then I'm going to do 2 rows of this mohair and then kind of follow the pattern all the way down. I just think that'll look nice, but again, totally up to you. And this is where you get to sort of personalize it. So I'm going to get this sleeve to the row where we start the increases, and then I'll show you the increase pattern that I used for this. So I'm going to show you how I do this sort of mesh looking part of the sleeve. Basically, I just drop all of the thicker yarns and continue on with just one strand of a very thin yarn. So right now I have I'm holding 3 strands together, and I'm going to drop these 2 thicker ones and continue on with only this pretty thin yarn. So make your slip stitch with just the thin yarn, and then cut your 2 thicker yarns, leaving a little bit of space to weave in your ends, and then tie off these ends with this thin yarn. And then just continue making double crochets. This is sort of what I was talking about at the beginning, where the way your sweater looks is going to vary a lot depending on your hook choice and your yarn choice. If you make everything, I mean, you can make your whole sweater in yarn that's this thin, and it will just all have this really light and airy look. And I think that would look really nice as well. So just try things out. Experiment with really big hooks, experiment with little hooks, experiment with, you know, really thin yarn or super bulky yarns. I think that there's so much customization that you can do with just this one kind of simple basic idea. So this is where I'm going to start my increase rows. This is kind of where it hits on my forearm. And on this side, this is the equivalent row. If you want your sleeve to be less wide, add a few more rows at this point before you start increasing. So I would add maybe 2 more rows here, and then you would just do 2 less rows of the increase. So I'll show you the increase pattern. It's really simple and it's easy to add more or take some away. To start the row, you're going to do your normal chain 2, and then we are going to increase every 3 stitches. So you'll make 1, 2, 3 double crochets, and then in the 4th stitch you will put 2 double crochets. So we have 3 double crochets and then an increase, and you will continue this pattern all the way around the row. So 1, 2, 3, and then 2 in the 4th stitch, 1, 2, 3, and 2 in the 4th stitch, 1, 2. So that's your increase row. And when you get to the end of the row, simply slip stitch as before. I'm going to change colors here, but you don't have to. And on this next row, it will be a kind of normal row. So there will be no increases on the second row. So an increase row, and then a row where you just go around the sleeve with all double crochets. And then for the next row, this is the 3rd row, you will increase again, do another increase row with the same pattern. So 3 double crochets, 1, 2, 3, and then an increase in the 4th stitch. One, two, three, and an increase in the fourth stitch. This pattern basically just continues on from this point. So as you can see, this is the first increase row, and then you do a normal row, increase row, normal row, increase row, normal row, and then I like to end just on another normal row. And like I said before, if it starts to get too wide for your preference, just stop increasing and simply add more normal rows, or you can add more normal rows down here so that the bell part is right at the edge. The last thing you need to do is turn your sweater inside out and weave in all the ends. So depending on how many color changes you did, you might have more or less ends to weave in, but I'll just show you how I weave mine in. So I'm going to start with this one at the very top. So I use a little crochet hook actually to weave in my ends. This is a 3.5 millimeter hook. Basically anything that's smaller than the hook you used for your project will work. You can also, of course, use a darning needle. So I insert my hook into one of the stitches and pull the ends through, and kind of just continue doing that at random. So what you want to do is make sure that the ends are sort of being pulled in multiple different directions, so that if you were to stretch the fabric, they won't just pull out. And they're all already secured, or they should be, from throughout the project. So you don't have to worry about an unraveling, but you don't really want your ends kind of just randomly poking out either. So I'm going to take it up here, and then maybe I'll take it across, kind of up through here. And then I'll take it down here, and then bring it back this way. So that's pretty secure. See, if I pull the fabric of the crochet, it doesn't immediately pop back out. So then I will just snip that. And honestly, if you're making this for yourself, a lot of these little strings inside, honestly, I probably would not weave them in unless I'm giving it to someone else, but you definitely want to make sure all of the things, all of the ends that are near the edges are woven in so they don't stick out when you wear it. And that is it. I will finish weaving in all the ends and then insert some footage of me wearing my new sweater.